I get to be the big bad vendor. Sorry about that. I'm not going to tell you what Jamf stands for. But we've been around for a bit. We've been doing this Apple device management thing for a while. And we have thousands of customers around the world. I've helped a few hundred of them over the years. Those are my airport codes for home for the past however many years. Been around a little bit, put about 500,000 miles in the air working for Jamf. So I'm currently the Director of Professional Services, formerly the Manager of Professional Services, formerly a Pro Services Engineer, formerly a Jamf customer, and a Mac admin in higher ed. So if it seems like I've been there and done that, I probably literally have. And if you're looking at my title and thinking, that's not Charles Edge, I'm the new packaging, same snarky flavor. But anyway, so my talk today is very much about Jamf and. It's all the stuff that you can use around the Jamf infrastructure and ecosystem. And it actually, I think, Matt teed me up really well there to talk about how do we inspire people to build additional tools that can talk to other things. And so we absolutely value tools that augment our own, and especially in pro services, very selfishly. When we show up at a customer site and somebody expects us to build Rome in a day, it is really helpful when somebody's already got a good start on it. So we love open source tools. And we love leveraging the collective brains of the community because there's a lot of really smart people out there. And I already want to build a crypt in Jamf Pro connector. So there you go. My focus today is about monitoring, which is a pretty broad topic when you think about it. And there are a ton of tools out there that people use. And I've heard a lot of them already spoken about in the conference so far. And there's a bunch of other free and open source tools that we love and use all the time that aren't directly about service monitoring or client monitoring. And as with anything, there's about a dozen different ways to tackle the same problem. So I only have half an hour. And we're going to go pretty surface here. One thing I want to point out is I have a lot of URLs in my presentation. If anything sparks your interest, don't panic if you don't get a screenshot of it before it disappears. I have kind of an aggregate slide at the very end that has all the URLs on it. So that's the highlight reel. If you just want to wait for that one, that's cool. All right. So when we're talking about keeping an eye on Jamf Pro, monitoring is actually a pretty huge topic. And it's easy to kind of fall down a rabbit hole and be like, I want to know all of the things about all of the things forever. Cool. What are you going to do about that information? I don't know. Literally had an engineer tell me that. He had all these pretty graphs and charts, all this amazing information that his monitoring tool was spitting out at him. And I said, cool. What are you going to do about that? He's like, I don't know, but it's so pretty. So my request for you guys is to keep in mind step 3. We're going to get to that at the end. But to break down the topic a little bit, let's actually just keep it extremely functional. Again, this is pro services. Somebody hands you a problem, you have to build a solution. So what is it you need? What does your boss need? What can you actually act upon? And there are different contexts for this. One of the things that I want to talk about is specifically about Jamf Cloud, because you don't have access to that infrastructure. And in plenty of business cases, there are reasons why that happens. Maybe you're just not allowed into that data center. Maybe it's just hosted in a place or behind firewalls and administrative rules that don't let you touch it. So that's the other question. What can you access? What do you actually get from your services? So we're going to talk about different Jamf Pro components. And I do have a few just kind of caveats. If you have access, we can do these things. If not, that's okay. We've got other options too. And so I've kind of built some buckets to think about for the monitoring situation there. Can your devices, you or your devices, actually talk to your management server? That's availability. Is your service okay? And I bet at break I'm going to hear from people who will have things to tell me about services that are not necessarily okay. And that's okay. I've already heard that. performance? Can you make it better? Can it be snappier? Can it be more responsive? And don't forget about your clients, because they're smart and they can tell you things about their own status. So if we're looking at Jamf Pro, of course, it's in its most basic form, there are three components. There's a database, there's a web app, and if we're doing Mac management, there's going to be packages. The database doesn't require a whole lot of oversight and management over time, but failover and replication are still really important, so we're going to focus on that just very briefly. If we're talking about open source tools, this one is awesome. This is called Orchestrator, and it's out on GitHub, allows you to do really cool web visualizations of your current replication status. Of course, our recommendation is master-slave replication, and so you can have multiple replication nodes and see the current status of all of them. If something's starting to fail, this gives you intelligent information about promoting a slave to master to take over. Again, one of many URLs. This one's super cool, but there's a problem. And that is, if we're in Jamf Cloud, you can't touch the database. Sorry. So we have to kind of keep our eyes on the things that we can monitor more actively. So let's talk about the web app. Super cute Tomcat icon there. We can get general health response from the web app, and also just information about the Jamf Pro configuration. So I know everybody has already a lot of favorite web app monitoring tools, no doubt. The one we like is called Zabbix. We have a JMX template file that we can actually apply. And again, this is one of those moments of if you have access to your web app server because you're hosting it in your own data center, then you can actually run the Zabbix agent and spew a lot of great information to your server for analysis. Now, again, this is that moment where the engineer's eyes glaze over. Look at all the pretty things. Okay, but what is this event telling me? And he couldn't tell me that. So this is very helpful for understanding peak events, things like memory, things like at 8 a.m. when clients start checking in, everything spikes. Cool, okay, maybe we have a resource constraint that we need to look at there. It's open source and incredibly informative, potentially too informative. That's actually something that I would warn you against just over time. This is one of those places where you can get highway hypnosis while you're watching the spikes and ebbs of the graph. So Zabbix is a great tool, but again, it requires that you have access. So let's take a step back and let's think of something actually really, really, really simplistic. You may or may not know this, but every single Jamf Pro instance has a built-in health check URL, and it is that. So your Jamf Pro address, if there's a port at the end, and then / and then healthcheck.html. Every single one has it. It's just a regular HTTPS response. And if everything's working, all you get are a couple brackets. And so it's super easy to write a script, like my colleague Eric Johnson did, that actually curls that. He has that sitting as a launch daemon on his Mac, or cron, if that's more appropriate for your OS. And his version of the health check script, he's actually built in hping3, and he checks against AWS, like general cloud lag, to reply back and say, how's everything doing? But you can deconstruct this logic to use it against your on-prem server too. Super easy and super informative every 5 minutes. Are you responding? Cool, 5 minutes later. How about now? Everything okay? The script also has some send mail stuff built in so that, at least for him, it can send an email to alert him that something's wrong. All right, back to our Jamf Pro bits. The robust behavior is actually really, really reliant on a solid connection between web app and database, and that is represented there. Both servers should live in the same data center. You don't want to have a web app or a load balancer that's on one continent and a database that's on another. That's a quick road to pain there. And the fastest way to bog down this connection is to overload it with bad queries. And there's an easy way to identify some of those risks. And this is really more about prevention than about detection. You don't want to know about it when it's failing. You want to know about it before it's even a risk. And so there are some tools out there, including this one. This is a Jamf summary tool where you create a Jamf Pro text summary, export it to a text file, run it through the tool, and you can see over on the right there, there's some red cautionary items about things like, I think I have a token that expired. At the bottom there, it's going to tell you about smart groups. It's going to tell you about nested smart groups. Do you have logic upon logic upon logic that could potentially bog things down when a computer checks in and falls into one of many smart groups? So this tool is out on the Jamf support page. Easily kind of digs through some of the just potential pain points. It'll tell you about things like your certificate expiration. It'll tell you about policies that are maybe updating inventory more aggressively than we recommend. Now, what about being in IT? I mean, this is one of those general, this isn't a Jamf Pro problem, this is just IT problem. And it's that high volume event. It's the 500 kids in an auditorium who are all trying to enroll their iPads all at once on 2 APs, and then Apple drops a new iOS update. I mean, this stuff happens, right? The worst scenario will hit you in the most inopportune time. So because there are any opportunities for bottlenecks, that was a thundering herd, by the way, that took out our Jamf Pro. It's really, really helpful to have an eye on how are things scoped. And so this is a tool by Zach Doro. And what it lets you do is actually investigate scope in ways that you're not necessarily used to doing. So it lets you look at a policy and examine the scope of the policy or a configuration profile. Conversely, it lets you look at a group and say, what group is this is scoped to what policies and profiles in the background. So this can actually let you inspect and potentially react to any scoping problems or any kind of strange group conflations that might happen. So this is also incredibly helpful if you ever find yourself inheriting a management environment where somebody else who has since left made completely inscrutable decisions about grouping and categorization and scoping. That never happens except when it totally does. So being able to kind of pick apart the logic or just at least see what on earth did you build and how can I react to the scope that's actually created there. So awesome tool to help figure out interactions. All right. So I'm back to my Jamf Pro bits here. We've talked about the database. We've talked about the web app. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about packages, because this is wildly important for Mac management, of course. There are basically 4 different places to put a package, and that would be one or maybe a mix of different flavors of distribution points. So we've got out in the cloud, we've got Jamf Cloud Distribution Service. We've got other cloud services. There are plenty of customers who roll their own AWS cloud or Akamai or Rackspace. And we've got a lot of customers who absolutely still roll on local file shares. And maybe they get fancy and they throw Apache or IIS on that file share, and now it's an HTTPS download. So the thing to remember here is that package distribution really has its own uptime standards. It's one thing to be able to check in and phone home and say, I'm alive, or respond to an MDM wipe command. It's another to say, I need Office right this second. So these services are treated a little bit differently as far as criticality and uptime. And one thing to remember here is that for Jamf Pro, a package is actually 2 different pieces. There's the metadata about the package, which is the name and the path to get it. And then there's the actual package itself. And creating those and uploading them to Jamf Pro can happen by way of Jamf Pro admin, the actual web app, the actual GUI, or by way of the app, the binary that's distributed with the Jamf Pro apps. So you can create your metadata, And then your file, it doesn't actually matter how your files get to where they need to go in your network. They're just packages. Just upload them. Just get them there. Just sync them there. As long as your client is reaching out to a path that it can resolve and a file happens to be there, it will go ahead and download and install that for a package, for a policy. So then we get into replication, and this becomes a major issue. If you want to use Jamf Cloud and just rely on Jamf Cloud distribution service, awesome. Things are easy at that point, right? But if you have a global organization and you need to make sure that files are where they are for local file shares, for HTTPS, whatever, you're going to need to replicate from a single source of truth. And there's any number of ways to do that, and the most predictable would be something like rsync. And people use it, and it's great, and it's awesome. There's another tool that people like. It's not open source, which is why it didn't make the screen, but it's called Resilio, and people have had great success with it. This one, though, I think is pretty cool. SyncThing is a continuous file synchronization program that's multi-platform and has a really sweet web interface. And if you just break down your package distribution as standard file share and you want to sync files from over here to over here, this tool is amazing for that. So that's something to keep an eye on or try out if you need it. But if we're talking about global availability in a distributed environment like what we were just talking about there, and let's say that you've got a troublesome distribution point that might just be a Mac Mini that might just sit on somebody's desk across the ocean, and it might just spontaneously power off from time to time. Again, one of those things that totally never happens except for the times when it happens. Maybe you need to be able to demonstrate that packages are globally available. Maybe you need to be able to demonstrate that they are up to date, consistent, and that your local clients can get them. So I wrote just a little tiny tool that will compare hashes for a sample package. In this case, I just used Firefox because it was small. So grab a hash, and then throw it in as a parameter in a script. Let the script go ahead and cache that package on a local test device in a geographic area that you want to verify and make sure that that's working against a local distribution point. Provide the name of the package and the hash as your parameters. And then you'll have a policy-based explanation for, hey, that replication isn't working for particular locations. Or maybe it is, and you're just getting policy success all day long. Great. But what you can do is actually use your distributed global fleet to do some checking for you. So you can just have it cache a local package. Is everything cool? Is this the most up-to-date version? Awesome. I would just report with policy success. Otherwise, I can report back with failure, and you can actually receive an email notification about that. This is just a little gist that I wrote it's like 14 lines long with comments. This is not epic scripting right here, but it is purpose-built. It's meant to attack a particular need. This is another problem that happens over time. Things get messy, and I've already heard people debating the merits and potential pitfalls of retaining packages forever. And I get it. I'm kind of a digital hoarder myself, and I'm not going to even talk about my CD-ROM collection back at home. But the thing is that things age over time, and the relevance to your management system decreases over time. There's an awesome tool called Spruce, and that's by Shay Craig. And basically what it's going to do is dig into your Jamf Pro and say, here's a package that's not in use. And then you can actually take action on it. This is the thing I'm talking about as far as actionable information. Let's find a thing that's wrong and fix it. Declutter. It'll also help with scripts and printers, both of which are an easy way to just clutter things up in your Jamf Pro. I'm a big fan of keeping things tidy and focusing on what you need right this second. Historical information, I know people need it for compliance reasons. It bores me. So, all right. I'm done with the Jamf Pro bits. But the thing is that your managed clients, they have a lot to say. They are smart devices with their own periodic check-in abilities. that can keep an eye on themselves and report back when something happens. Alternately, we can react when they do something new. So I've got a few categories here to talk about as well, and I'll just dive into agent status. Now, I'm sure it surprises you greatly that software is occasionally imperfect and crashes. The Jamf binary occasionally crashes, but the thing to know about here is that the crash logs are actually saved to a known path on your local client computer. And so I wrote just a very brief extension attribute that you can use to count those reports. Now, that number of reports, for example, my Mac this morning had 8 crash reports that arrived in the past 30 days. Okay, is that good or bad? I couldn't actually tell you. The thing is that that's 30 days worth of activity, and I didn't notice a darn thing wrong. So the number itself is not actually useful information, but it can help you start determining things like trends. It can help you understand if you have any weird conflicts. If, for example, you ever find yourself deploying, I don't know, 5 or 6 different data loss protection agents, and they all run straight into each other and make things crash all the time, you might see this number spike. This is kind of like one of those, hey, let's have a baseline. Let's understand outliers from the baseline. So maybe you've got one problem machine where everybody else is like, yeah, 10 crash logs in a month. Cool. But then you've got the guy who's got 600. Something's wrong with that computer, and you can start to dig in and figure that out. This one didn't even make 14 lines of code. This is just a very simple one-line extension attribute that reports back the number of crash logs. Again, by itself, not actionable information. And I'm begging you, don't call support and say, Katie said that I have too many crash logs. This is about understanding kind of the baseline of your fleet and understanding what happens when you apply updates and changes. Security and compliance is kind of a hobby of mine. I guess that's a thing to say as far as Jamf Pro. Of course, last year we released a very cool feature for integrating with Microsoft Conditional Access. This is not open source. It's built into the product. It's super cool. I'm just mentioning it because it's cool. But I'm going to move on to stuff that actually is open source. A couple of years ago at some InfoSec conference, somebody said the Center for Internet Security Standards were the thing to pay attention to. How many people apply them or have had to deal with them in their environment? Yeah, a few. So I got tired of having to handle this on an ad hoc request every time I'd walk into a customer and they'd hand me a spreadsheet. Hey, we need to do these things. So I built a tool set that will let you, the admin, translate that spreadsheet into basically just a plist to say, yes, I care about this compliance item. No, I don't care if the Finder shows file extensions. Yes, I want Bluetooth in the menu for security reasons. I'm not sure why. Based on those requirements that you set up, you can then audit and report back to Jamf Pro. Hey, everybody's compliant. Or, hey, there's a lot of risk over here and over there. So it's a script, a couple extension attributes. Once you've done a lot of auditing, there's a remediation function, that very last piece. And that will actually, again, based on the preferences that you've set, it'll go and it'll fix stuff. This is a tool set that might look a little aged, and that's mostly because they haven't released the benchmark for High Sierra. And at this rate, I'm not sure they will, honestly. We might just have to be waiting for Mojave. But the cool part about this is that it's designed to actually be readable alongside the PDF. So if you're looking at item 2.6, you can actually look at it in the PDF and look at it in the source code and understand exactly what's being changed, or at least read from the file system. Now in Jamf Pro version 10, we did a lot of work to make things prettier in general, but we also worked really hard on our reporting and some dashboarding. That doesn't mean that other people haven't done cool stuff, including, this is Todd Hull's JSS report, which in version 9 would have been absolutely amazing, and is still pretty amazing in version 10 as far as augmentation for dashboarding. And this is all API calls, so you don't need direct web server access. This is reading straight out of the API and generating very cool graphs to show you your current state of your fleet. So that's JSS report. Has anybody ever used dashing or smashing for dashboards? This is from a blog post by Sachin Parmar. Apparently, I love that smashing flat out says this is for big TV screens. This is to have that beautiful dashboard that people walk past and go, ooh, I have no idea what that is, but it's pretty. So if you want an excuse to have your manager buy you a big TV screen, I think this is an awesome opportunity to do that. Very cool tool and a really great implementation. Again, it's all API. Pull the information, show it, and then you can react. There's the red square there that tells you something's wrong. We have an events API in Jamf Pro that allows you to fire a webhook that says, hey, something happened. A computer joined a group or a computer took an action. And that webhook can be connected to pretty much anything, including, for example, Slack. It is very, very likely that in your day-to-day admin lives, you are not sitting in front of your Jamf Pro watching smart groups increment or de-increment as the day goes by. This is an awesome tool called Jackalope, written by Bryson Terrell, who's another Jamf who I don't think he sleeps. And what that does is it sends a notification straight to Slack. You probably have your chat tool open all day, potentially all night anyway, so why not let your clients tell you when stuff happens? So I joined a group, I applied an update, I installed something I shouldn't, or everything's just fine, nothing happens. To go backwards even a little bit further, we've talked about database and web services and packages. We've also talked about clients and what clients can tell you about things. Let's be a bit more general, a little bit more globally focused here. There is a tool called, it's called the Cloud Status Tool. And it's super easy. It actually reads our status page API and says, there's a problem right now. Or everything's fine. And then it actually, by default, will check in every 5 minutes. Nope, still a problem. Or it'll increment and tell you when everything's resolved. This is just one of those quick ways because you've got a million other things going on. It's just a little icon that sits in your menu bar at the top, and it'll change color if an event occurs. So if you find yourself clicking along and then realize, you know, my Jamf Pro is not being super responsive, maybe that's a quick way to just know that there's a problem. Of course, our cloud is out in AWS, and AWS has 1,000,001 amazing tools, command line tools, that you can use for your purposes. There's this tool called AWS Status that you can actually run as a command line, install it with pip, and then have it run as a launch D item if you need to report status back. And it'll actually report on an RSS feed that tells you everything's fine in your data center right now. Or maybe you find yourself in sort of the unenviable position of being in charge of lots and lots of Jamf Pro servers. Maybe you have to do aggregate licensing for, I don't know, dozens of Jamf Pro servers because you work for a shell corporation that is an umbrella over a lot of different organizations. And at the end of the year, when renewal comes up, you actually have to tally all of the licenses that are in use. This is one of my favorite tools. It's called Scout. And basically, it lets you add in an API read account to all of your Jamf Pro instances and aggregate the licensing up at the top of the screen there. So that'll show you all of your managed devices. It'll show you the current hardware distribution, the last time they checked in. Could also add in, for example, the current OS. And it'll actually show that to you at whatever period you designate as far as how many times they check in. So that could be once a minute. And the top of the window there is showing you the most accurate information. So that is Scout. There we go. All right. So that was a lot of tools. And we go back to the beginning. What do you want to monitor? What do you want to take action on? And here's my request to you. Beware too much information. It's absolutely a thing that you kind of fall down a rabbit hole when you're thinking about monitoring. I want to know everything about my service status. Okay, do you have that kind of time? Do you actually just need to know, is my server alive? Can my clients talk to it? Cool. Is there an overload event that's happening? I should probably be able to check into that if something's gone non-responsive. If I'm doing my due diligence and I'm able to do preventative maintenance over time, then things should probably stay okay, generally speaking. As promised, here is the summary of the tool set with gratuitous links at the bottom for the Jamf developer documentation and the Jamf marketplace if you decide that you'd like to write your own and share them with the world.